As of May the 16th, you're going to find most of the forest land and what they call federal land, which is also public land across this country, will be closed to usage by just about anyone. Pay close attention to what I'm going to read you. This is from the Federal Register, Volume 59, Number 32, Wednesday, February 16th, 1994. Summary: this proposed rule would provide a comprehensive revision of the acts prohibited on the National Forest System enforced by personnel of the Forest Service. Respond to emerging law enforcement issues, the enactment of new laws, using crime as a guise to bring in a police state on all federal land. Ladies and gentlemen, remember in my book, I outlined in Public Law 100-690 how forest rangers and postal officials were then authorized to be armed and act as part of the federal police, becoming state police of the New World Order. And I'm just going to go through and read high points. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Remember, this is from the Federal Register, Volume 59, Number 32, Wednesday, February 16th, 1994. It begins on page 7880. Violators of these rules can be punished by imprisonment for a term not to exceed 6 months and are subject to a range of fines as a result of the enactment of the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. 18 U.S.C. 3559 and 3571. Both federal and state laws apply to the National Forest. 16 U.S.C. 480, that is, both federal and state criminal and civil jurisdiction apply to persons within the National Forest. During the past several years, however, it has become evident that reimbursement through the Cooperative Law Enforcement Program cannot alone provide the level of protection that should be afforded the public and Forest Service recreation areas. I didn't know there was a great outbreak of terrible crime in the forest. Did you, folks? When state and local law enforcement units cannot respond promptly and trained and equipped forest officers are at a location where persons need help or encounter criminal activity affecting those persons, the Forest Service should be in a position to render emergency assistance because forest officers generally cannot enforce state laws. The agency needs rules which will make certain state crimes violations of Forest Service regulations. Hope you understand what you're hearing. 18 U.S.C. 3559, 3571 and the National Forest System Drug Control Act of 1986 as amended, 16 U.S.C. 559B through G. Did you know that there was a National Forest System Drug Control Act of 1986? Subpart B grants authority to regional foresters and forest supervisors to issue orders and regulations prohibiting certain acts in specific areas. The term alcoholic beverages would be added to clarify which beverages are intended to be covered in the prohibition against possession and use of alcoholic beverages at 36 CFR 261.58. Prohibit possession of all forms of alcoholic beverages when provided by an order. In the present rules can be remedied by defining alcoholic beverages as beer, wine, distilled spirits, and any other beverage defined as such by state laws. A new paragraph is proposed to support on-site control of the public and maintain order during firefighting, law enforcement, or, the catch-all phrase, other operations. Prohibits offensive, derisive, or annoying communication. Just what in the hell does that mean, folks? Prohibits offensive, derisive, or annoying communications. Does that mean if you snore, they can kick you out of the forest? After I get through here, you won't have to worry about it because, according to these rules, you're not going to get one toe in the forest, folks. The risk of public alarm, nuisance, jeopardy, or violence. Other actions directed toward inciting or producing imminent lawless action. Imminent lawless action. Can they now read your mind? This is amazing. Make arrests under that act. The National Forest System Drug Control Act of 1986. Prohibit the possession of contraband. What is contraband? Well, folks, contraband is anything they say it is. Certain animal parts are unregistered automatic weapons. Some samples of included items would be certain animal parts are unregistered automatic weapons. A new paragraph would be added prohibiting being under the influence of any controlled substance or alcoholic beverage. And here's one: fire, prohibits the firing of tracer or incendiary ammunition. The wording of the paragraph requires that a forest officer must prove that a person actually fired the ammunition. Expanded to prohibit the possession of tracer or incendiary ammunition as well. The possession of tracer or incendiary ammunition on the National Forest system can be harmful to persons as well as resources and is clearly not within the public interest. If persons are prohibited from possessing such ammunition, there is less likelihood of it being fired. Fish and Wildlife prohibits the hunting, trapping, fishing, catching, molesting, killing, or having in possession any kind of wild animal, birds, or fish. Did you hear that? Paragraph A currently prohibits the hunting, trapping, fishing, catching, molesting, killing, or having in possession any kind of wild animal, bird, or fish. Expanded to include the words transporting, buying, selling, bartering, or offering to buy wild animals, birds, or fish to cover additional activities. The revision would also add shellfish. Property administered by the Forest Service to clarify that the prohibition applied to United States government property rather than to the personal property of a forest visitor. That means all federal lands. By special use authorization contract approved plan of operations of federal law or regulation, the following are prohibited. To prohibit disturbing, damaging, excavating, digging, removing, transporting, possessing, buying, selling, bartering, or offering to buy, sell, or barter any natural feature or other property of the United States. That includes, folks, a pebble, a flower, a piece of grass, dirt on your shoes. The paragraph would also include a corollary addition of the disturbing, damaging, excavating, digging, removing, transporting, possessing, buying, selling, bartering, or offering to buy, sell, or barter any plant that is classified as a threatened, endangered, or sensitive species, rare and unique with the term sensitive in order to reflect a change in agency terminology. Sensitive, folks, means anything. Doesn't mean endangered. It just means sensitive. Occupancy and use of the National Forest System by persons or entities other than the Forest Service. The prohibitions in this section relate to occupancy and use of the National Forest System by persons or entities other than the Forest Service. Paragraph B would be revised for clarity to include residing upon the National Forest System as a prohibited act. If you have leased a cabin on forest land for a period of 99 years and you just leased it last year, your lease is up. Paragraph B would be revised for clarity to include residing upon the National Forest System as a prohibited act. Paragraph D would be revised to remove the prohibition against the discharge of a firearm across or on a forest development road unless any person or property is exposed to injury or damage. Forest Development Road includes closed roads, traffic service, level D roads, and other similar roads that have little or no vehicular use. Because of the limited traffic, hunting along these roads is not considered to be a safety problem. The proposed revision would add a prohibition against the discharge of a firearm from a vehicle and then make it clear that the current prohibition against discharging a firearm in any manner or place whereby any person or property is exposed to injury or damage as a result of such discharge or use applies to any location in the National Forest System. In other words, if there's even a slight remote chance that someone may be somewhere in the forest, you are prohibited from firing or using any firearm. A new paragraph would prohibit outfitting or guiding on the National Forest System without a special use authorization or in violation of federal or state law. Outfitting and guiding be conducted under special use authorization due to the lack of a definition for the two activities. The approach taken in the proposed rule is to define outfitting and guiding at 36 CFR 261.2 and then to prohibit these activities without a special use authorization at 36 CFR 261.10. In other words, there's another license you got to get. A new paragraph G would require the use of seat belts. Seat belts. If you're in the forest, folks, you must have a seat belt. A single rule that would apply throughout the National Forest System. This provision will ensure the protection afforded by seat belts throughout the National Forest System regardless of individual state laws. Prohibitions in areas designated by order. This subpart grants authority to regional foresters and forest supervisors to issue orders and regulations prohibiting acts in specific areas. In other words, they can make their own laws. Orders, subpart A, paragraph E1 would be revised to include the words special use authorization, contract, approved plan of operation, and federal law or regulation as the list of either authorizing documents used by the Forest Service, or to make clear that the order may also exempt persons with authorization given by law or regulation, which means no matter what the authorization is that you have, they can negate it. They can tell you no. Paragraph M allows for the issuance of an order to prohibit the discharge of a firearm, air rifle, or gas gun. Under the proposed rule, this paragraph would be revised to read, discharging or possessing a firearm, air rifle, gas gun, or other device capable of causing injury to persons or wildlife, or capable of causing property damage. For example, the addition of the prohibition against possessing is necessary for wildlife protection at certain times of the year on different national forest units and for public safety in areas of higher visitor use, or when property would be easily damaged by firearms and other devices shooting projectiles. The addition of any other device is necessary to support the inclusion of devices such as starter pistols, crossbows, which can cause serious bodily harm or death if used, and finally the addition of capable of causing injury to persons or wildlife or capable of causing property damage is necessary to specify more precisely the type of device to which the prohibition would apply. In other words, you can't take nothing in the forest that you could use to hunt or fish or trap. Period. And not just the forest. Remember, this applies to all public and federal land under the supervision of the United States government. Paragraph B would adopt the new definition of alcoholic beverage proposed, prohibit the storage of personal property in any area outside of a national forest developed recreation site when prohibited by an order. A new paragraph would be added to enable a regional forester or forest supervisor to issue an order prohibiting the possession, storage, or use of glass, food, or beverage containers. Now, you can't take a Coke bottle in there, folks. You can't buy a Coke bottle in there. You can't have any kind of a glass storage or glass food or beverage container. A new definition section would be added to provide for definitions of law enforcement officer and special agent. The definitions are needed in the regulation to support the section on purchase of evidence. Purchase of evidence. I didn't know that they purchased evidence. When did they start buying evidence, and what in the hell are they talking about here? Because it's not clear at all. But they're talking about purchase of evidence. Be revised and combined with Section 262.3, which governs the purchase of evidence. This revision is proposed in response to requests of several Forest Service regions for a payment scale for purchase of information and evidence that reflects the gravity of the offenses investigated, such as violations of the National Forest System Drug Control Act of 1986, as amended, for example, amounts that special agents could be authorized to pay for information or evidence would be raised from $200 to $400 respectively to $500 for a single transaction, with other increase or changes proposed for the employees so listed. The agency's authority to make payments for evidence and information was affirmed in a decision of the Comptroller General dated April 29, 1971, and allows for payment to further any criminal investigation, notwithstanding the classification of the offense. In other words, you're sitting in your campground minding your own business, and the two scumbags in the campground next to you run out of money. What do you think's going to happen now? Why, they're going to go sell some evidence against you to the forest rangers. Just like they're already doing across this country. And what do you think is going to happen when somebody gets caught committing a crime? Just turn state's evidence and get paid and get let off the hook. All they got to do is say, you did it, and testify against you in court. The title of this subpart would be Revised to read Administrative Impoundments and Removals, administrative remedies that may be taken by the Forest Service to impound and remove animals or personal property on the National Forest System. Criminal law enforcement procedures associated with impoundments and property seizures made pursuant to arrests and searches are not covered by the regulations and are contained in the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure for the United States District Courts and the Forest Service Law Enforcement Handbook. In other words, they can take your property, your car, your rifle, your sleeping bags, your tent. And if it's anything like what they're doing in the rest of the nation, probably your children and your home and your RV and your land and your bank accounts. Paragraph D would be revised to allow the Forest Service to use unredeemed or abandoned personal property if it is needed for official use rather than having to offer it for sale. Which means if there's some forest agents who like something that you have, folks, and they don't have it, but they want it, they can just confiscate it from you, say that you were committing a crime, not press any charges, not go to court, no ruling by any judge, and the property is theirs to use as they wish. Remember Gordon Call? They wanted his land, so they went in and killed him. When are you going to wake up, sheeple? This is what they did in the Soviet Union. And we said that it could never happen here. Remember that? Removal of instructions. This section currently provides for the removal of vehicles or other objects which create either an impediment or hazard to the safety, convenience, or comfort of other users of the National Forest System. Who's going to be there using it? They've outlawed everything that you could possibly do in the forest. And I'm not done yet. Remove it. The rule would be revised to include a vehicle or other object which has been left in such a manner that it impairs or may result in the impairment of any area of the National Forest System or other areas under Forest Service control. Automobiles or other large objects left as junk in popular undeveloped recreation areas of the National Forest System. Who interprets what is junk? This doesn't specify how long it has to be there. It doesn't specify what condition it has to be in. What if you're driving a car that needs a paint job and you leave it somewhere overnight while you're hiking in the woods? Will it be there when you get back? Can you even hike in the woods? The Forest Service proposes to amend its rules governing prohibitions and law enforcement support activities in order to improve protection of public and their property. Update the rules to reflect expanded Forest Service law enforcement authority granted by statutory changes. Now Forest Service personnel are law enforcement personnel. Make technical corrections and revisions due to the passage of new laws and the promulgation of new rules in other parts of this chapter, and provide both the agency and United States Department of Justice increased flexibility in prosecution options for certain offenses. I wonder how long it will be before they also have a SWAT team and are wearing Kevlar vests and ski masks. Executive Order 12-866, it looks like. And Executive Order 12-630 for the evaluation of risk and avoidance of unanticipated takings directs all agencies to evaluate whether certain proposed agency actions present a risk of effecting a taking of private property. Of the order exempts law enforcement actions from a requirement of the executive order. In other words, they're exempt. They don't have to worry about it. They just take it. This proposed action involves additions and technical and administrative changes to prohibitions of activities on or affecting National Forest System land and resources, visitors, and employees. Section 2A3. The Department actively seeks to promulgate regulations that promote economic growth, create jobs, are minimally burdensome, and are easy for the public to understand, use, or comply with. The Department is committed to issuing regulations that maximize net benefits to society and minimize costs imposed by those regulations. This principle is articulated in President Bush's January 28, 1992 memorandum to agency heads and in Executive Orders 12291 and 12408. Get those and read them. You will be amazed. The Department believes that public input from all interested persons can be invaluable in ensuring that the final regulatory product is minimally burdensome and maximally efficient. Well then, why didn't they tell anyone that they were going to do it? I wonder, why didn't they let anyone know that they were doing this? Why wasn't it on the news? Why wasn't this put out in the newspapers? Why didn't they notify the public that they're doing these things? I could go on and on and on, and this is several pages more, folks, that outlaw literally anything that you could possibly think of doing in a forest or on government land. In other words, you better not go in the national forest or on government land or federal land or public lands ever again. In here, if you have cattle on grazing land, ladies and gentlemen, on public land, you're not going to have them there for long. Law enforcement officer means an employee of the Forest Service in other than the Criminal Investigative Series GS 1811, which means all Forest Service personnel are now law enforcement officers. The state police are here. And there will be more of this in future days, weeks, months, and years. Who is authorized by the Washington Office Director for Law Enforcement and Investigations to conduct investigations, make arrests with or without a warrant or process. Make arrests with or without a warrant or process. Make arrests with or without a warrant or process. Issue violation notices. What's a violation notice? Execute and serve search and arrest warrants. Carry firearms for law enforcement purposes and perform other duties as directed in connection with the enforcement or administration of all laws, rules, and regulations in which the Department of Agriculture, Forest Service is or may be a party of interest. The Forest Service, including the authority to conduct investigations, to execute and serve search and arrest warrants, to serve orders, subpoenas, or other judicial processes as directed, to carry firearms, make arrests, issue violation notices, and perform other duties as directed in connection with the enforcement or administration of all laws, rules, and regulations in which the Department of Agriculture, Forest Service is or may be a party of interest. Wake up, you stupid sheeple. Our country is gone. It has been gone for a long time. We are moving into the Soviet gulag quicker than you can wink. Where's the freedom? It's not reasonable, ladies and gentlemen, to assume that the citizens of the 13 colonies who had fought a revolutionary war to absolve themselves of the centralized power and jurisdiction of the English king would shortly thereafter cede a comparable power and jurisdiction to the federal government. It's not reasonable at all. The citizens established a nation unique in all the world, free of governmental greed, power, interference, and restraint, a nation where happiness was a sacred right and where liberty, freedom, and independence were fundamental and unchangeable principles. What has happened? Webster defines freedom as, quote, liberation from the control of some other person or arbitrary power, liberty, independence, unquote. I'm talking about what our forefathers collectively formed. The government, their servant, they, the sovereigns. The only purpose of government in the constitutional republic our founding fathers established was according to the Declaration of Independence, which most of you have never read, never paid much attention to, don't have a copy of, have no idea what it says. Quote, to protect the rights of the governed, unquote. What has happened? The government of the United States that we, the sovereign people, created and entrusted to protect our fundamental rights has misled us, has deceived us, has lied to us into believing that the government is sovereign and we, the people, are persons subject to United States jurisdiction. Now what, I ask you, is their motivation for this mass deception, this manipulation, this great lie? The Supreme Court has ruled that the rights of sovereigns cannot be taxed or regulated by the government. In law, the person is generally a juristic or corporate entity without rights. A human person is called a natural person. By creating a legal term for person that excluded the sovereign, the government has been able to create vast volumes of governmental rules and regulations for the person to pay income tax, property tax, license and registration fees, business license fees, marriage license fees, dogs license fees, etc. It is also this person that the government can jail as an incentive to comply with its codes. The sovereign is not the legislative person, but they have convinced you that you are. The term person does not include the sovereign. Since in common usage the term person does not include the sovereign, statutes not employing the phrase are ordinarily construed to exclude it. United States versus Fox 94, United States Supreme Court Decision 315. The sovereignty of the state resides in the people thereof. California, Title I, Article 1, Section 100. Quote, while sovereign powers are delegated to the agencies of government, sovereignty itself remains with the people by whom and for whom all government exists and act. Yick Woe versus Hopkins and Wu Lee versus Hopkins 118, United States Supreme Court Decision 356. Quote, state governments are but trustees acting under a derived authority of the people, unquote. 4 Wheat 402. The Articles of Confederation, which were not repealed by the Constitution, did you know that, folks? The Articles of Confederation were not repealed by the Constitution. State this. Article 2. Each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this Confederation expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled, unquote. Quote, each state declared itself sovereign and independent according to the limits of its territory. The soil and sovereignty within their acknowledged limits were as much theirs at the Declaration of Independence as at this very hour, unquote. Harcourt versus Gilliard, 25, United States Supreme Court Decision, 12 Wheat, 523, 526, 527. The original several states were each separate, independent, and proud nations who vehemently valued their freedom. They fought and died in a revolutionary war to sever their ties as subjects of the King of England. As previously stated, their purpose was to establish their independence as sovereigns. The states jealously guarded their own sovereign rights, powers, jurisdiction, and land. Why is it that most of the land and most of the states of the several states of the United States is owned by the federal government? How did that happen? They haven't paid anyone for it. The states refused to cede their newly won sovereignty to a federal government and be subject to another jurisdiction. The citizens of the states, however, thought that it would be advantageous to the general welfare of the states to delegate certain responsibilities, such as uniform monetary creation, which was to be in gold and silver, defense and postal services to a federal government, other than the very limited and reclaimable cessions of powers delegated to the federal government as specified in the Constitution. The states maintained the same independent sovereignty that they had under the Articles of Confederation. The only concession of lands made within the states to the federal government were lands or enclaves essential for the operation of the federal government. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution gave the federal government exclusive sovereignty and jurisdiction over only the District of Columbia and the territories and possessions belonging to or ceded to the United States. A federal marshal on your private property within a sovereign state has no jurisdiction and no authority whatsoever. Neither does the BATF, neither does the Federal Bureau of Investigation, neither does the Post Office Department or the United States Forest Service, and public lands belong to we the people, not the federal government. Do you understand what I am conveying to you? However, you must understand in America, such federal jurisdiction could not exceed a 10-mile square outside of the District of Columbia and did not include the 50 states which retained their sovereignty through their people. Prior to the adoption of the federal Constitution, states possessed unlimited and unrestricted sovereignty and retained the same ever afterward. Upon entering the Union, they retained all their original power and sovereignty except such as was surrendered to the federal government, or they were expressly prohibited from exercising by the United States Constitution. Now, listen very, very closely, for I'm going to outline for you the limited powers of the United States. This is a list of the only areas where the people have ceded powers to the federal government. Remember, the absolute sovereignty is still with the people, and there can only be one sovereign. The Constitution for the United States of America, Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have the power, 1, to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises with the following restrictions. A. All direct taxes must be apportioned, that is, divided equally according to population. And B. All indirect taxes must be uniform. Now I ask you, where does that leave the graduated Marxist income tax? 2. To establish uniform rules regarding the naturalization of aliens. 3. To establish uniform rules of bankruptcies throughout the United States. 4. To coin money. To coin money. To coin money. That meant gold and silver coin, and the law specifies that a dollar is 1/20th of 1 ounce of gold. To regulate the value of such money and the value of foreign coins, and to fix a standard of weights and measures for such money, which was done and has never been changed. What you have in your pocket is counterfeit debasement. 5. To provide for the punishment of counterfeiters of United States coins and securities, and the law says the punishment for the debasement of the monies of the United States of America is death. Yet I see no officers of the Federal Reserve hanging from any gallows, where they should be hanging at this moment. 6. To establish the post office and post roads. 7. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings, in effect copyrights and discoveries or patents. 8. To constitute tribunals or courts inferior to the Supreme Court. to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas, to define and punish offenses against the law of nations, to declare war, to grant letters of marque, letters of retaliation and reprisal, to make rules for capturing the enemy on land and water, to raise and support armies, to appropriate money for the military. No appropriation of money for the military shall be longer than 2 years. Now understand what I'm telling you. For 15 is to provide and maintain a navy, and the navy is the only authorized standing military force that is constitutional. Number 16 is to regulate the land and naval forces. Number 17, to call forth the military to execute the laws of the Union and to suppress insurrections and repel invasions of the enemy. 18, to organize, arm, and discipline the military. The appointment of officers and training of the military as prescribed by Congress was reserved to the states. The states. Yet the appointment of officers and training of the military is not being done by the states, therefore guaranteeing their treason when they are ordered to move against the sovereign citizens to bring about the one world government. Other than these specifically delegated powers, the government of the United States has absolutely no power over the citizens of the 50 states, and you will notice, ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing here that gives them authorization or power to enforce the law anywhere. Anywhere. You see, the Constitution prohibits a police state. So, how is it that a police state is emerging nationwide? The United States government may not assume powers not specifically granted to it by the people. Also, the people, as the absolute sovereigns, may take back any powers it has delegated, and it is time for us to do that. I must warn you, though, there will be no political solution, there will be no relief in the courts. If we are to maintain our freedoms, if we are to reinstate the Constitution as the supreme law of the land, legally within the law, it will be by the means that our forefathers left for us, exercising our rights and powers guaranteed to us by the second article in Amendment, all power. As Mao Zedong once said, he did say something right, folks, all power emanates from the barrel of a gun, and the moment you give up your guns is the moment you cease to have any power in this entire world. Good night. Wake up, and God bless you all.
Good night, folks. God bless each and every single one of you. Good night, Pooh, my darling sweetheart. Good night, Allison, you vibrant little bundle of joy. You know, this house is haunted. I can hear you girls screaming and playing all the time. Annie, you are the love of my life. You always will be the love of my life. And I miss you. I miss you all terribly, terribly much.